welcome you all for a webinar on youth entrepreneurship. This online webinar is organized by SSIP cell of A.D. Patel Institute of Technology, a constituent college of CVM University, Vallabh Vidyanagar. Charutar Vidya Mandal University has 20 constituent colleges with around 10,000 students and more than 400 faculty members. This event is possible with the blessings from Engineer Shree Bhikhubhai B. Patel, President of CVM University, and with constant motivation and support from Dr. Vishal Singh, convener of ESII cell. Hereby, I invite Dr. Vishal Singh to say a few words about ESII cell of CVM University. Principal sir, please.
A very good morning to one and all. Arnab, it's good to see you. My fellow principals, faculty members, students, innovators, entrepreneurs. It is a privilege for me to welcome you all. CVM University has formed a special cell called ESII cell in order to promote the culture of startups, entrepreneurship, innovation amongst the stakeholders of CVM University. The cell is supported by a Fab Lab incubation center which can house, to start with, 100 seats. We have full-fledged workshop, internet facilities, office space available in order to encourage our students, stakeholders for startups and entrepreneurship. I hope everyone within the system and connected to the system will take benefit of the facilities that are being offered by CVM University under the blessings of President CVM University, Engineer Shree Bhikhubhai Patel sir. I hope programs like this and with support of people like Arnab, we would go a long way to create an ecosystem whereby we can encourage our stakeholders to become Atmanirbhar on the lines of what is being promoted by our beloved Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi. So, extending the national vision, we would take this initiative forward. I wish all of you would participate well and learn from this initiative, and this association shall go on and build upon further to give fruitful results to everyone within the society. Thank you. Dhirenji, please.
Thank you very much, sir. Now let me introduce today's speaker, Mr. Arnab Chakraborty. Mr. Arnab Chakraborty is an investment banker turned social entrepreneur. He has a master's degree in international business from the University of Delhi and has a bachelor's degree in physics from Presidency College, Kolkata. Mr. Arnab started his career with ICICI Bank and with Standard Chartered Bank in Mumbai, and then went to develop as an head an India desk for a Geneva-based bank before setting up International Business Facilitators, IBF, in 2008 and India Foundation in 2015. As India Director of United Nations flagship capacity building program, MPRETEC, Mr. Arnab works with governments, banks, large corporations, chambers of commerce, etc. in India to promote a culture of entrepreneurship in keeping with United Nations sustainability agenda. Mr. Arnab has helped to establish Empretec in India following an official request to UNCTAD from the Government of India's Ministry of MSME. He is a founder director of International Business Facilitators, that is IBF, a not-for-profit entity based in Geneva, and Empretec India Foundation, that is EIF, a non-for-profit civil society organization based in Kolkata that today hosts the UN's Empretec program for India. We heartily welcome you, sir. There is an announcement that there will be a question and answer session after the speech of Mr. Arnab Chakraborty. Now I request Mr. Arnab Chakraborty to enlighten us with a speech on youth entrepreneurship. Mr. Arnab, please.
Thank you very, very much for that hearty welcome. Thank you very much indeed. It's such a pleasure being here. It's a lovely, bright and sunny day in Kolkata. I hope that's how it is in Anand as well. Because they've seen that, and this is quite a revelation when I came across this, that on the days that were gloomy and overcast and cold, bleak, the stock markets of Frankfurt, London, Tokyo, and some of the important exchanges in the world would actually end up lower than they started. And on days that were really nice and bright, the stock markets would actually end up higher. And there's been a lot of research around this. And so, one gets to start questioning about this relationship between the mind and the environment that we are in. And when we see smiling faces around, as we now do in this room, I think it makes for a very good setting for any discussion at all. Not just about entrepreneurship, about human behavior, about philosophy, about psychology, about anything at all. Here, of course, we are going to be talking about entrepreneurship and promoting a culture of entrepreneurship in aspiring entrepreneurs in educational institutions such as yourselves. And it's such a pleasure being here. I'd like to make this a little interactive. So I'm not really going to, I don't have a prepared speech. I'm going to tell you a little about what the United Nations has been doing in the developing world with respect to promoting entrepreneurship as a way out of poverty. And I'd like you to, especially the young aspiring entrepreneurs here, to ask questions, to put out questions, not necessarily ask questions, because not all questions can be answered. But it's important to put out the questions. It's important to put out the observations. So the first thing I'm going to reflect on is what Vishalji mentioned a little earlier about Atmanirbhar. He mentioned this in his opening comments. And Atmanirbharta coming from a reliance on self. Now, at Empretec, which is really for the developing world, the concept of Atmanirbharta is not necessarily limited to self. It's about reliance on a community. It's not just about the self, it's about a community. So how do we now work on a community? How do we build an ecosystem, especially for faculty, for stakeholders in educational institutions as yourselves? The idea would be to help promote a culture of trust and competencies. So we've seen that any relationship at all, is really based on a combination of trust and competencies. Trust is about opening up. It's about asking. And competencies is a combination of two things. And we've seen this in entrepreneurial ecosystems, the world around. It's about skills and behaviors. Now, skills by itself do not comprise competencies. When you look at a person, you think that the person is competent, it's not just about the skills that the person possesses. It's also about the behavioral traits that the person demonstrates, isn't it? I mean, think of successful people in entrepreneurship, in leadership, in corporate governance, in the world of politics, anywhere. We've seen that success really comes potentially more from demonstrated behaviors than from the skills that one possesses. Because as an entrepreneur, one can actually bring in the skills that one needs. If you're an entrepreneur, if you like to hire a skilled person, you could do that. You can connect the dots. The specialty of an entrepreneur is able to understand what is it that the consumer needs, the customer needs, who the stakeholders are, and treats the stakeholders really well and builds a climate of trust and confidence in himself, in the ecosystem that he or she develops. So Atmanirbharta, again, in the context of entrepreneurship, could be about persuasion and networking, could be about independence and self-confidence, could be about some of what we call the power cluster behaviors. But independence and self-confidence doesn't just come from developing a sense of reliance on oneself. It comes from a host of behaviors. And let me tell you a little about the behaviors that we've seen in the UN program. And I've been associated with this program for about 12 years now. In the context of, and we've seen this in most of the developing world. The program is currently in 50 countries. There are 500,000 graduates of the program today. And we've seen that a spirit of entrepreneurship is best developed when there is a balanced demonstration of behaviors around what we call the planning cluster of behaviors, and I'll get deeper into that in a moment, achievement cluster of behaviors, and power. It's not just about power, it's also about planning, and it's also about achievement. So let's look at the planning cluster of behaviors. Shall we, Vedika? Can we talk about the planning cluster of behaviors?
Absolutely.
Could we just lay them out? Okay, all right. So one of the formative behaviors of entrepreneurial thinking. Now, look at this as building a house. What's the first thing that you do when you set up a house? You start working on the foundation of the house. So it's about the foundational aspect. And this is something that we call the planning set of behaviors. The first and the most important planning behavior here is goal setting. To be able to understand what is it that one needs in the short term, over the medium term, and over the long term. And being able to set a goal requires a good deal of introspection, a good amount of information seeking, looking around and finding out what is it that's working in a particular ecosystem. So that leads me to the second, which is information seeking. And information seeking is something that is extremely important. If I want to set up a bakery shop in Park Street in Kolkata, I need to know why 10 bakeries in that street have failed. In fact, there's a lot more information that failures make available than success, because there are many reasons that could lead to failures. There's often a few very special reasons that could lead to success. And if you follow those reasons that could lead to that have led to success in a particular enterprise, then chances are you could fall for an outcome bias, because causality is not very well understood in entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is not really something that can be taught. It can be learned, it can be acquired, but entrepreneurship really cannot be taught. So it has to be imbibed. It's a subject matter of inspiration. So if you go to the United Nations, if you look at the entrepreneurship program of the UN, the Empretech program, the byline is inspiring entrepreneurship, not motivating people to become entrepreneurs, but inspiring people to go on to become entrepreneurs. And there's a big difference between inspiration and motivation. We'll get to that in a bit. So let me continue. All right. So I'll give you a little bit of the important points that has come through after about 30 years of research that the United Nations has done across 70 countries worldwide, including India, around what is it that works for entrepreneurs, what doesn't work for entrepreneurs. As I said a little earlier, what doesn't work gives us a good amount of insight into what we should be doing. And this is an approach that the Greeks used. Philosophically, it's called via negativa. Via negativa is about reducing taking out the things that don't work in an ecosystem. And then you're left with things that do work. So I'm reminded of a conversation between the Pope and Vincent van Gogh. The Pope asked, no, it was Michelangelo rather. Michelangelo, how is it that you've created David, the masterpiece of masterpieces? It was a marvel of artistic excellence. It was really, really something. So David said, well, all I had to do is to just look at the clay. I just had to chisel off the unnecessary bits, and what stayed back was David. So that's the via negativa approach, right? And in many ways, entrepreneurs, good entrepreneurs who've seen success, have tasted success, have been looking not to solve problems, but to avoid them. There's a big difference between solving problems and being able to avoid them. When you're avoiding problems, you're not just developing your information-seeking abilities and your problem-solving abilities, but you're also looking at the paraphernalia. You're looking at various other aspects that have led to creating the problems in the first place. And you would possibly want to do things that would prevent you from, let's say, losing before you go in for the win. If some of you play chess, it's about castling. There's some people who castle their king fairly early on in the game. There's some players who do this because it's important that you put yourself in a position where the risk of a loss is mitigated before you go in for a win. That's something that entrepreneurs do. So that's another aspect of entrepreneurial behavior, is calculated risk-taking. And calculated risk-taking is about three things. It really is about assessing the risk well. It's about mitigating the risk. And it's also about taking that risk. It's no good for an entrepreneur to be able to assess the risk and mitigate the risk and not be able to take the risk, right? So I think it's very, very important that all three dimensions of risk-taking are understood. And there's a big difference between risk-taking and uncertainty. And we've seen in many entrepreneurs who failed that they've not really been able to tell the difference between what is, what's risk-taking and what's uncertainty. Many entrepreneurs have gambled away precious resources, have gambled away their 3, 4, 5 years of contribution into their startups. And we've seen this. We've seen this in many, many cases. And it has nothing to do with whether the entrepreneur comes from a top engineering college or from a standard engineering college, or from any walk of life, for that matter. We behave in a certain way, right? And human behavior, when it comes to information seeking, we have certain problems. And this is to do with the way the fast brain and the slow brain talk to each other. I'm sure some of you would be aware of evolutionary psychology. You would have followed how the brain works. There's a lot of development over the last 10 years. There was a Nobel laureate. Of course, you don't have Nobel Prize in psychology. You have a Nobel Prize in economics. So he got the prize for economics, but his work was in psychology. Daniel Kahneman is his name. And if you read any of Daniel's works, he would talk about cognitive biases, errors, traps, and fallacies. Things that prevent you from seeking the right information. Things that get in the way of looking at an information and being able to process it internally, or rather than looking at news, which is already pre-processed information and which is made available to you in some sort of a digested format so that, ultimately news sells. So how do we tell the difference between unbiased or biased information? How do we tell the difference between processed and unprocessed, something that you would want to process yourself? So there are ways in which this can be done. There are behaviors that can be practiced. It's all about a coordination between the slow brain and the fast brain. And the slow brain, as you know, is a very, very recent part of the brain. It's a neocortical development. It's in the frontal lobe of the brain. Very, very recent. It's happened over the last 200,000 years. But the fast brain, the reactive brain, has come into existence, about 2 million years ago. When we started walking straight. And around then, when we started moving away from the other apes, is when in fact, that's around when the fast brain developed. And the fast brain has the amygdala, which is the risk processor, right in the middle. And what it really does is it's a fight versus flight sort of a decision making that it does. It doesn't get into the finer points of decision making. So as an entrepreneur, if you're talking to a customer, and if you look at a customer, you decide whether the customer is going to buy from you now or is he going to buy from you over a period of time. And then you think, okay, I think it's important that he makes a purchase right now. And so you will do everything in your power to make that sale right now. So that will affect the way in which you negotiate with a person. It will affect the way in which you look at long-term goodwill over short-term gain, right? So all of this is to do with the fast brain. So the fast brain takes decisions when actually most of the decision-making, quality decision-making for an entrepreneur should be made from the slow brain. So the fast brain takes decisions without consulting the slow brain. And there's a lot of problems that happens as a result of this. Okay, so information seeking is one good way to understand. Of course, there are biases around the contrast effect. How do you kill a frog? You put a frog in a beaker of lukewarm water or cold water, and then you very slowly, gently turn up the temperature, right? So the frog, as the temperature rises, the frog understands it's getting warm, it's nice, maybe it's a nice sauna bath. So the frog is enjoying itself. A little later, the frog continues to enjoy itself. And a little later, the frog starts losing sensations. And then a little later, before the temperature gets to a point where he can't really take it, the frog's lost all sensation. And all the frog has to do is to just be there and wait for death to arrive. So that's the contrast effect. We don't see very subtle changes. Slow changes are very difficult for us to observe. That's not something that the fast brain is equipped with. It's something that the slow brain can do. But fast changes are very easy to observe. Slow changes, very difficult to observe. So that's again, a very, very important bias. And that's one of the biases where many entrepreneurs have lost their enterprises too. There are many industries. Look at the Coimbatore textile industry. When the Chinese started making inroads in the textile industry in India with the value for money textile products, you actually saw that there were these generational entrepreneurs. Over generations, they've been creating their enterprise. And over a period of time, they say, oh, well, nothing can really go wrong with my enterprise. That's just a small blip. It's just a little correction. Things will pick up. But they couldn't see the Chinese were a lot more efficient. They were a lot more productive. They were a lot more competitive. They couldn't see that. And so over a period of time, many of these entrepreneurs lost their businesses. And this has happened across India. It's happened across industries. And it's not just, if I had the time, I'd take you through about 20 case studies here. So information seeking, that's another important behavior to work on. Now, what happens when you set a goal? And what are the problems with goal setting? I think a major problem with goal setting is the power of now. The power of now. Again, being able to see something that we can immediately see before our eyes. And our goals, therefore, are set on the basis of something that we can actually see over the next 6 months, 1 year, maybe 2 years. right? How many of us have 30-year goals? How many of us have, if we think deeply, can come up with even a 10-year agenda for our life? How many of us have a goal that is connected very deep into our raison d'etre, a reason for existence? You would have heard this term called ikigai. This place in Okinawa off Japan, where people live to over 100 years old. And when the researchers went down and found out how is it that they live for so long, they found it's all to do with goal setting. It's to do with the fact that the goals are structured in such a way, and from very early on in life, that they meet 4 conditions. The first is doing what I love, not doing what my parents love or what my teachers want me to love, but doing what I love, right? And that's the difference between a backbencher and a front bencher. We'll get to that in a little bit. I hope I don't offend anyone here, but I'm just giving you facts, and I'm just giving you things that I've learned from my last 12 years of being in the entrepreneurial ecosystem in the country and being with the UN program. So the first thing, doing what you love. The second would be doing something what you're good at. If you're not good at it and you love it, then there's a problem. It's like, I want to be a great singer in Bollywood, but I end up there. I'm not good at singing. I'm not good at playback singing, but I'm really passionate about it. I really love it. I want to do this. I want to make it happen. So what happens is I'm going to end up frustrated because people are going to tell me on the face. And they don't tell me on the face, they'll tell me off my face, which is even worse, right? So that's those 2 conditions for being in love with what you're good at, and again with what you really love. So being able to love, being doing something that you're good at. Also, another two set of conditions, and this is even more important today than it was before. The third being, what is it that the world needs? What the world needs, okay, is important. Because if the world doesn't need shark fin soup, then I can be the best fisherman in town. I can go out trawl and kill 1 million sharks in my lifetime. I can hack off their fins and take the fins onto my boat and then leave the rest of the body to die in the oceans. I could do that. I could have a beedi factory. I could have a, I don't know. I mean, in many places I've seen ITC, for example, is a company that makes a lot of revenue from selling cigarettes. So there was a lawyer I know, or I used to know at ITC, who used to make a lot of money at ITC by fighting cases on behalf of ITC with people who have lost their loved ones, right? Lost their loved ones to smoking. So this person, this lawyer, he was a great lawyer. He was lovely. He was very good at it. And he loved what he did. Okay. But he fought cases for ITC and he got a lot of money for fighting those cases because these were, these were against punitive damages and, sort of from secondary smoking and things like that. And so he ended up making, 10 houses. He had flats. He had a lot of money. He had more money than he could take with him when he left. So when he was on his deathbed, he was actually fighting cancer. Right? And he was telling me, he held my hand like we're related in a distant way. So he just held my hand and he said, Arnab, will they forgive me when I get up there and meet my maker? When I meet my maker, will my maker forgive me for what I've done? So it's very, very important to know what is it that the world needs. That's important. And the fourth component of goal setting or long-term goal setting would be, are you making money out of it? Is the world paying you for it? Do you think you can actually make money out of it? Because if you don't, then again, you will be frustrated. One would be frustrated because if let's say I'm a social entrepreneur, I used to be an investment banker. I used to make a lot of money. A Swiss banker usually makes a lot of money. So from there, I came over to Kolkata. I'm now doing what the world needs, what I love. I wasn't really doing what I loved in my previous avatar. Now I'm doing what I really love. I'm good at it. I think I'm good at it. I am also making a decent amount of money from it. And the world needs this, as is evidenced from this discussion that we're having today. The world needs this. So once these four things come together, it becomes a lot easier to set one's goals. So think about that. Goal setting. All right. So goal setting, information seeking, and another important aspect when the goal is set is systematically planning and monitoring. You can set up a goal, but why is it that most New Year's resolutions don't work? Why is it that, all right, I'm going to shed weight from the 1st of Jan 2021. And chances are I'm not going to be able to do much about this. Why is it that it doesn't work? In most cases, it doesn't work because there's no follow-up mechanism. There's no systematic planning and monitoring. So systematic planning is about breaking down a large task into subtasks with clear time frames. And many entrepreneurs don't do this. They end up setting goals and they just let it be. So as they're moving along, the goalpost is moving along with them. So I'll do it in a year. And then 5 months later, I'll do it in a year. So your goalpost keeps moving. So that's very important, especially for startup entrepreneurs or early stage entrepreneurs. So that's your planning cluster of behaviors. Okay, all of that is under the ground. Now, once you've set up a structure, right now I'm on the 19th floor of a 36th floor building. It's a high rise in Kolkata. There are 5 of these buildings. And this is a 36th floor building. So what do you think they needed to do to first set up a 36th floor building? They needed to go underground 11 floors. They had to dig deep 11 floors before they could set up the 36 floors. So that's your planning cluster. Once the planning is done, then comes your achievement, which is the building itself, which is the works, the masonry, the layout, where is the drawing room going to be, where's the sitting, where's the bedroom, where's the bathroom, where's the kitchen. All of that is to do with setting up the structure of your enterprise, right? And that's something that we call achievement. And this has 5 systems of behaviors. There are 5 systems here. The first is opportunity seeking and initiative. So entrepreneurs, good entrepreneurs, are able to seize on opportunities. They're able to see an opportunity when they're able to recognize an opportunity from something that is not an opportunity. And once they find an opportunity, they're able to seize upon it fairly with facility. They're able to bring it into their, understand what needs to be done with that opportunity. So there's a good amount of information seeking that is connected to opportunity seeking behaviors. And another aspect of OSI is initiatives, being able to take an initiative, doing things before being asked or forced to by events, taking out an insurance. So entrepreneurs, as I said, like your castle of your king with your rook, you would do that because you don't want to lose before you go in for the win. That's important. So what is it that you've done to prevent yourself? Where's your safety net? That's important. All right. Then you have persistence. Entrepreneurs persist, and that's a behavioral trait. Persistence is not something you can find in a manual. It's something that comes from within. And persistence is of 3 kinds. The first is really to persist when there is an obstacle or there is a challenge ahead of you. By the way, what's the difference between an obstacle and a challenge? Could you think of a difference between an obstacle and a challenge? Just think about it for a minute. I'd like this to be interactive. I don't want this to be just a one-sided conversation. Is it all right if I encourage some of you to write down what you think in a chat box or talk? Just unmute yourself and talk. So challenge and obstacle, right? These are 2 very different things. A challenge is internal. An obstacle is external. It's a very, very big difference. So let's say I'm about 46 years old. I want to get on top of Mount Everest. And I haven't been working out at the gym. I don't have much stamina. So the challenge is to tell myself and to convince myself that despite my ill health, I'll be able to get on top of Everest in 2 years, right? In keeping with my goal. Now, that's the challenge. That's overcoming a challenge. Overcoming the obstacle is getting the 10 lakh of rupees that's needed for this. Getting a good Sherpa to take, who would accompany with me in the beyond the base camp. Getting a good coach, going across to Darjeeling and training at the Himalayan Institute for 6 months. All of those are obstacles. You know that you have to go through some of those to be able to get yourself primed. But the challenge is much deeper, internal. right? So persistence is about overcoming both challenges and obstacles. For most people, okay, I'll persist. I know persistence is about hitting your head on a wall. That's not what persistence is. And in fact, persistence is also about stepping back and finding another way. When water in a river finds a rock, what does it do? It just goes around it. Just goes around it, right? It doesn't really have to go through it because it can't immediately. Of course, Grand Canyon doesn't happen in a day. So what you're doing is you're basically separating a challenge from an obstacle and working on them differently. That's a hallmark of being persistent. And another aspect of persistence is responsibility, being able to really take responsibility. You would see any person who persists, and behind that person, you'd find that the person is truly responsible for the work that has been taken up. So that's persistence. So we can get into detail, but I'm just keeping this. I'm keeping it short. Of course, we have workshops, and in workshops we can discuss this threadbare. Then fulfilling commitments is another aspect of entrepreneurship. That's another floor of the building. Fulfilling commitments. My word is my bond. When I commit to someone, I ensure that I follow up on my commitment, no matter the personal sacrifice, right? And that's important for an entrepreneur, to be able to stay true to what you've committed. And commitment to who? The first aspect of commitment is to oneself, not to the others, to oneself. It's commitment to one's ikigai, commitment to one's goals. If I've set up goals, I'd like to be able to commit to my goals. That's a very, very important aspect of commitment. Then, of course, you're committed to your stakeholders, your customers, your employees, people who make your business happen. So all of that is part of commitment. Then, of course, there's a demand for efficiency and quality. You mentioned, Vishalji, you mentioned early on, again in your opening notes, about innovation. Important. I think you addressed young people in this program as innovators, young innovators. Is that right? So innovation is about making things happen which are better, faster, and cheaper, but at the same time. At the same time. And there's a very, very important reason that it's important to get a little deeper into this. Better and faster is not necessarily cheaper. Faster and cheaper is not necessarily better. Cheaper and better is not necessarily faster. So how do you make all three happen at the same time is the moot question. How do you get things better, faster, and cheaper at the same time? That is the mark of a true innovator, right? It's not about a person who's just doing things better and faster, because things obviously will not be cheaper. So that's about innovation. So we see a lot of innovation. We see a lot of innovation that works, and many, many more innovators that don't work. Many innovators fail. If you go to the National Research Development, NRDC, National Research Development Corporation, they have their head office in Greater Kailash in Delhi, you'll see that there are files of patents there. There are millions of, lakhs of patents there, they're gathering dust. So all these patents have been filed and no one has commercially exploited them. No one has taken it back into their businesses to run. So they're all just lying there. There have been lots of scientists who've put out their patents. They're all there. अच्छा से सजाया हुआ है उस इंस्टीट्यूट में और कुछ कमर्शियल लाभ नहीं हो पाया. Society का कुछ लाभ नहीं हो पाया. So why does this happen? This happens because the innovator has not been thinking about better, faster, and cheaper at the same time. At the same time. That's key. Right? Okay. All right. Let's move on. So that's about demand for efficiency and quality. Another aspect of demand for efficiency and quality is about being able to set benchmarks. Where are your benchmarks? As an innovator, where are your benchmarks? Are you, as an institute, is your benchmark against a top university from Israel? Or is it from another, is your competition another institute in Rajasthan or somewhere else, which has not been doing a lot of innovation? Who's your benchmark? Is your benchmark Israel Or is your benchmark another, maybe an university in Northeast India, which is not really creating innovators, right? So where are your benchmarks? Even as an entrepreneur, where are my benchmarks? Who am I benchmarking, right, as an entrepreneur? All right, so that's important. So another aspect of innovation or demand for efficiency and quality is about development of processes. Once I've got my benchmarks, once I know that I'm going to be able to innovate, once I have the processes, all of that set up, it's very important to institutionalize those processes. And some of these processes are external. They're about how things work in my enterprise. Some of these processes are internal. It's about habit formation. I know that I'm not very persistent. So how do I build on my persistence? How do I get my fast brain to talk to each other so that behavior becomes habit over a period of time, and habit becomes character over a period of time? And this character then rubs off on the character of the enterprise that I'm working with. How do I do that? So how many people are really interested in habit formation? Very few. Everyone's looking at the shortcut. What can I do in 2 years? What can I do in 1 year? What can I do in 6 months? No one's really thinking. Very few people. There are people who do. That is why, on average, year on year increase in revenue, 3% of entrepreneurs survive. 97% of entrepreneurs fail. 97. Okay. I'm sorry. You can leave the meeting if you have to. There's no problem. But this is a sobering statistic, and this is not something that I'm picking up. You can look up the Forbes. You can look up any research on entrepreneurial survival rate, and you'll actually see these very, very sobering statistics. So what is it that makes entrepreneurs survive? Let's go beyond. Let's look at some other behaviors. I mentioned calculated risk taking at the onset. I broke it into 3 parts: assessment of risk, mitigation of risk, and taking that risk. And taking that risk is something that is to do with Atmanirbharta, that is to do with your independence and self-confidence, that is to do with your ability to persuade and network with people, being able to convince people, being able to invite people to try your product or try your service, right? So I don't think I'm going to go on and on. I'm just going to leave you at this. I think I've spoken enough. These are some of the behaviors that the UN has researched across 70 countries, and the Empretech program with its 500,000 entrepreneurs. And one of the reasons why our survival rate is about 96, 97% rather than the 3% is because we practice these behaviors. So there is a gym where I'd like to encourage you to look at ways in which you can set up your own gym. You don't have to really get involved with Empretech. In fact, you can also look up a lot of our resources online. And I'm going to give you the website when you have the time. You can look this up, empretech.net. You'll see the United Nations has done a good amount of work on promoting entrepreneurship. There is a corner of this website where you will see youth entrepreneurship. So I'm just typing this out: UNCTAD policy framework for youth entrepreneurship. So just look this up on Google, and you will actually see a good amount of literature on how to set up a youth entrepreneurship ecosystem. This is especially for faculty here, okay? For those who are involved in the incubation center and the setup. I'm just going to request Vedika to come in here. Vedika, you've been an educationist, you're a social entrepreneur now. What are the problems you think with youth entrepreneurs? Where are the main problems? Where are the major problems? What is it that, why is it that youth entrepreneurs, as you see it, being a youth entrepreneur yourself, why are they unable to connect with senior entrepreneurs or with entrepreneurial ecosystems in a way that we would want them to?
So in my experience and with talking to people, I've realized that there's a sort of disconnect in the way our environment has been growing. So the entrepreneurs before had a very different environment and very different problems to deal with. But newer challenges and newer opportunities are bringing up newer problems which people are yet to figure out ways. So there are times when, the inspiration and the knowledge is coming from the kind of entrepreneurs that may not be as applicable today. So we need that innovation in even terms of imparting the skills, the trainings, the competencies, etc.
So do you think it's going to help if youth entrepreneurs of early stage entrepreneurs, for example, are encouraged to do their internships in industry, able to go across to industry and maybe work on a problem or maybe work on an opportunity in a business, a real business, rather than in an incubation system? They go out and do something in the business, and then they come back and work on their product in the incubation system with the facilities that the incubation system makes available. Do you think that makes sense?
It does, because in the real world, the problems that one is facing, it's very different from the incubation, because there we have a one-track mind that we have to develop this product. But when we go to the industry, we see what are the products available. Is my product going to really fit in there? Is there a need for that product in the first place? So all of these are only going to come with exposure, and exposure is really outside the classroom rather than inside.
Fantastic, absolutely. With this, Viranchiji, Vishalji, I'm going to pass it back to you. I'm happy to take any questions that our friends might have today, including yourselves. I hope this was useful, and we're standing by for any questions that you may have, please.
Yes, it was very wonderful. Thank you very much, sir. I think now the questions, if anybody is there, then they can write in chat box or they can unmute and they can ask.
Please, we have about 227 people, it shows. So I'm sure there are quite a few people here with questions. Bataiye ji, kaun hai? Please come on up. Is there anyone here who's faced some challenges while setting up an enterprise? Any kind of a challenge? And we were talking about backbenchers versus frontbenchers. Now let's make it a little light. Let's have a little light conversation here, okay? So I've been a backbencher for most of my academics, not just in school but also in college. And when I look around and I see successful entrepreneurs around, well, I've not really been it's not fair to say I've been a backbencher all through. I started out being a backbencher, but then I gradually moved towards the front of the class as we started moving up. But if I look around me, I see that successful entrepreneurs seem to be from the backbenches. Now, why do you think that happens? Why is there or could there be a relationship between where an entrepreneur or an aspiring entrepreneur sits in a class and how successful the person is going to be going forward? Viranchiji, what do you think?
I mean, one thing that you told, that do what you love, that feels me. I mean, that is very, very inspiring for. That is, if the person is having zeal to work something, and if he's working on that, then that will be wonderful. Even a backbencher can think of that, and he can carry forward his, knowledge part with this. Okay, so there is a question from Rishabh Shah. With COVID-19 coming up, are there any government policies for setting up the business working from home?
I don't represent the government, and I don't know honestly about any specific policy. I'm aware of the startup policy. I'm aware of the general policy of government that encourage setting up businesses. But I think, and it's a good question, I think a business can happen from anywhere. If it's a service-oriented business, you could set it up at home. It doesn't necessarily have to be a service business. I know of many manufacturing setups that work on off-sourcing or outsourcing the manufacturing, but actually working out of or setting up an office in a garage, maybe, or in one of the rooms. So I work out of home. This is a home office. Okay, so I'm working out of home as well. So I've not been going to our office for the last 6 months now. So I'm working out of my home office, and there's absolutely no problem. I think what's important is to understand that you're able to coordinate with the other members of your team when required. And as long as you're able to do that, working from home should have its, does have its merits. I can see another question here. Raktim Saikya, society-oriented products are mostly needs huge investment and ROI times long. How to deal with this? Start small. Okay, this question is about there's this philosopher who was asked a question by a person on the street. He said, "How do you eat an elephant? How do you eat an elephant?" So the philosopher said, he thought about it for a little bit. He said, "One bite at a time." Yeah. So how do you eat an elephant? You can eat an elephant. It's not that you can't. But one bite at a time, right? So grow organically. Don't think about inorganic leaps of faith. Think about growing small, starting small, growing small. Find that first customer, second customer. One of the reasons why many entrepreneurs have failed. I've personally coached many entrepreneurs from the top engineering colleges in the country. And I've seen that many of them have failed because they were always looking to get investor money. All they were looking to do was to get investor money. Investor के साथ एक tie up हो जाए, बस मेरा जिंदगी set, मेरा धंधा set. नहीं होता है. Because ultimately it's about sustainability. The investor can also pull out money. And there have been lots of cases where investors have pulled out money from enterprises after they've made money available. Okay, that has also happened. So that's that. How youth entrepreneurship helps students? I don't know. See, when I was young, when I was growing up, none of my teachers told me that entrepreneurship का भी एक पद्धति है, एक मुकाम है जहां पे आप पहुंच सकते हो आपके अपने बलबूते पे कुछ self-employment जैसा. The only options that were available is be a doctor, be an engineer, be a banker, be an IAS officer, or be a failure. These were the only options available. Okay, so entrepreneurship wasn't really but now I think it's your good fortune that in university systems and colleges like yours, there are professors who are actively promoting entrepreneurship. You're having sessions like this. You're promoting entrepreneurship in young people, right? So, सिर्फ डॉक्टर, engineer, या academician, या banker के बारे में मत सोचो. Entrepreneurship के बारे में भी सोचिए, क्योंकि यहाँ से you can actually find your ikigai. You don't have to play out someone else's goals of you. Because if someone is becoming a doctor or someone's becoming an engineer, chances are very high, and you can prove me wrong, chances are you're doing this because someone else has asked you to do this. Someone else wants. I know of many IAS officers, their sons and daughters are preparing for the civil services. They're preparing for the civil services because their father or their mother is an IAS officer, right? So ये तो होना ही है, एक tradition है, एक family में ये तो करना ही है, ऐसा ही तो बनना है, right? So get out of this. So my suggestion to you is get out of this. You have such a wonderful platform here. You've got professors like Vishalji, Viranchiji, you've got Devangji, you've got people to help you. Talk to them, find out what is it about your personal goals. Find your own ikigai. And look up this book called Ikigai by Hector Garcia. You can buy it on Amazon. Right? I hope I've been able to answer that. There's another question here on how are we doing on time? Another 5 minutes for these questions? 4-5 minutes? Is that all right, Viranchiji?
Yes,
Vishalji?
yes.
Okay, I'm Milonisha, secretary. I want to ask you how to overcome fears of taking risk or from negative thoughts. Very good question. Very, very good question. This is one of the finest. This is great because you're thinking about fear. And one of the biggest problems about entrepreneurship is about overcoming the fear. And this is about challenge rather than the obstacle. I mentioned to you a little earlier. The challenge is internal. The obstacle is external. मैं एवरेस्ट में चढ़ जाऊंगा अगर अच्छा शेरपा होगा मेरे पास, अगर ऑक्सीजन सिलेंडर ठीक से बहुत अच्छा ब्रांड का होगा, अगर मेरा ट्रेनिंग ठीक से हुआ, लेकिन इंटरनल चैलेंज, मेरा इंटरनल फियर्स को कैसे मैं कॉम्बैट करूं? वेरी गुड क्वेश्चन. I think what you need to do is to understand where fear comes from. And this has a lot to do with self-awareness. I mentioned to you a little about the slow brain and the fast brain. The slow brain is here. The fast brain is here. Okay? It's the point where the spinal cord meets, the spine meets the cranial system, the brain system, right? Your medulla oblongata. And that's the fear center. That is the risk-taking center also. So what you need to do is to convert fear into risk. All you have to do is to say fear comes from uncertainty. So मेरा information seeking जब ठीक हो जाएगा, तो मैं ये opportunity को fear से नहीं देखूंगा, मैं इसको एक opportunity जैसे देखूंगा, और इसको तभी opportunity जैसे देख पाऊंगा जब मेरा information seeking. Is it okay if I slip into Hindi once in a while?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Is it all right?
Yes, sir. Yes.
All right, good. So ये तभी होगा, एक information seeking और opportunity seeking का ये जो relationship, ये नाता है, ये तभी संभव है जब मैं uncertainty को risk taking जैसे देखूंगा. So risk taking और uncertainty का सबसे बड़ा difference क्या है? अंजलि जी, what is the difference? Or Miloni Shah, what's the difference between risk taking and uncertainty? Tell me. Risk taking and uncertainty में सबसे बड़ा difference क्या है? You might want to just put it out here as a note. Risk can be measured. Uncertainty cannot be measured. That's the only difference. There's a science of risk. It's called statistics. When you get deeper, you understand with a degree of confidence, 97% confidence intervals. You can draw up those confidence intervals for your business, for your production, for what you're doing. Right? But you can't do that with uncertainty. And therefore, all these behaviors, I mentioned to you about the planning behaviors, which is under the ground, the achievement behaviors, which is on top of the ground. And on top of the building, there is a flag. That's your power flag. The power flag is about your independence and self-confidence. It's about persuasion and networking. So, एक building में आपका foundation चाहिए, building का बुनियाद जो है, then you have your building itself, और उसके ऊपर flag भी चाहिए, जिसमें आपका नाम होगा. और इन तीनों में एक balance चाहिए. अगर balance नहीं है, अगर flag बहुत बड़ा हो गया, flag 50 मंजिल का है और मेरा building सिर्फ 3 मंजिल का है, तब problem है. Then there's a problem. मेरा foundation अगर 2 मंजिल का है और मेरा building अगर 50 मंजिल का है, तब भी problem है. So इन तीनों sets of behaviors में आप practice करते रहिए, and I'm sure you'll be absolutely stellar entrepreneurs. You'll be doing very, very well in your entrepreneurial journeys. Viranchi ji?
Sir, I think there is one more question from one student. So I think this may be the last. After that, we may.
Sure. Sure.
He want to ask that we would project or show to investors to convince them to invest their money.
आप एक काम कीजिए, आप मुझे बताइए, आपका तो ऑफिस अगर है तो ऑफिस में राउंड टेबल है या रेक्टेंगुलर टेबल है? राउंड टेबल या रेक्टेंगुलर टेबल? आपका स्टार्टअप में राउंड टेबल है या रेक्टेंगुलर टेबल? राउंड टेबल मतलब एक चेयर का कोई apart from the fact that one is convening the meeting, there is no other role. Like this, everyone is asking questions. Vishal ji is also in the same meeting as a student, as Viranchi ji. Sunil ji is also in the same meeting. Vedika is in the same meeting. I'm in the same meeting. We're all in a round table setting. This meeting is a round table setting. अगर रेक्टेंगुलर टेबल होता तो सिर्फ हम यहाँ फैसिलिटेटर्स को देख पाते और बाकी ठीक है, ले लो जो भी लेना है इस वेबिनार से, हाँ, फिर दफा हो जाओ, So that is not how it is. This is inclusive. So one of the important facets of sustainable development, United Nations का एक resolution है last year का 2018 का, जिसमें sustainable development का जिक्र किया है through entrepreneurship. वहां पे लिखा है sustainable अगर कुछ भी करना है, अगर एक enterprise sustainably बनाना है, या आपका जो center है इसको अगर sustainably बनाना, चलाना है, 10 साल का एक vision अगर है आपका, 20 साल का, 30 साल का, इजराइल के साथ आपका कंपटीशन अगर है, तब then what you need to do is to think circular, think round table, make your stakeholders your partners, make students your partners. When you have discussions, you make students your partners. Similarly, as an enterprise, Devang Gajjar, thank you very much for your question. Excellent question. What you
Yes,
want
sir.
to do is bring them over to your side. एक इन्वेस्टर का हैट पहनो, आप सिर्फ एक रोल चेंज कर लो, बस एक दिन के लिए आप इन्वेस्टर बन जाओ और आप इन्वेस्टर को आपका एंटरप्राइज का फाउंडर बना दो. देखोगे सब आंसर आपका आ जाएगा. You will see that you will get the answers. So when you have a discussion, when you change sides, when you immediately change sides, all of this comes out in the open. Trust, as I said, bunyad of a relationship is trust and competencies. I mentioned this at the very, very beginning. अगर आप investor के साथ एक climate of trust और competencies, ये दोनों के ऊपर आप focus अगर नहीं करते हो, then there's a problem. I hope I've been able to, just cast
Yes, sir.
a bit of,
Yes, sir.
yeah. Thank you, Devang. God bless.
Sir, I want to ask that in my family, I am basically Gujarati, so we have a big business of stone mining. So
Ji.
always my father and my elders tell us that we should have money of your own in the business. We should not go for an investor because at the end they will be a harmful thing for us. So what should I do?
Not necessarily. All investors are harmful. But I think your father comes from I think your father is a very wise man. When he tells you कि खुद अपना पैसा लगाओ, for two reasons. The best money that you can get in any business is not your money, it's the customer's money. Okay, understand this. It's the customer's money. अगर वो कस्टमर का पैसा नहीं है आपका बिजनेस में, तब का बिजनेस नहीं है, बिजनेस होगा ही नहीं. तो खुद का पैसा लगा सकते हो, थोड़ा सा पैसा लगाओ. आप गुजराती हो, मैं बंगाली हूं, ये गुजराती बंगाली का सवाल नहीं है. सवाल ये है कि रिस्क टेकिंग में कैसे दिख रहा हूं मैं, रिस्क टेकिंग का एबिलिटी कितना है, मेरा सेफ्टी नेट कहां है. एक राजा का धन भी जा सकता है. ओके, money is money. So what you need to do is pay attention to investing a little bit of money, setting up a business, but pay attention to the client's money. अगर client आपको पैसा दे रहा है for your services, for your products, for whatever you're doing, then you're on the right track, my friend. नहीं तो सिर्फ एक दो ऐसा भी होता है, कुछ एक दो I don't want to take names, okay? So I've been mentoring quite a few institutions. They've been saying is एक इन्वेस्टर ला दो अंटाइड वर्ल्ड इन्वेस्टमेंट फोरम से, इन्वेस्टर ला दो. हमारे बहुत सारी कंपनीज है. कंपनीज के साथ जब बात करता हूं, कंपनीज का कौन खरीदा आपका प्रोडक्ट, आप एक शैम्पू अगर बनाते हो, किसने खरीदा ये शैम्पू? हाँ, पापा जी ने खरीदा, मम्मी ने खरीदा, भाई ने खरीदा, बहन ने खरीदा, कुछ फ्रेंड्स खरीदे. इससे कस्टमर बेस नहीं बनता. आप दिखाओ एक कस्टमर जिसने आपका प्रोडक्ट खरीदा है, जो आपसे आपका रिलेटिव नहीं है. So if that has happened, then okay, then chances are you're in business. अगर ऐसा एक बिजनेस है तो अपना पैसा डालो उसमें, and you get chances are you'll get a very good return on investment because your risk taking is that much more sound. So practice all these behaviors. You don't have to come to Empretech workshop for this. You can just look up these behaviors. I'll share this set of behaviors with you. विरांशी जी, एक entrepreneurs guide है जो United Nations ने बनाया है, एक entrepreneurs guide. ये guide मैं आपको I don't think I can share it now, but I'll just write this down, okay? It's called the UNCTAD, the Empretech Entrepreneurs Guide. इसमें ये सारे behaviors का जिक्र किया है, all the behaviors are listed here. ये एक वर्कबुक जैसा है, तो जैसे जैसे आप अपना बिजनेस बढ़ा रहे हो, इस वर्कबुक को आप यूज कर सकते हो. So you can look this up on the Google and you can take a printout. It's about 80-90 pages. एक और अहम बात, एक बिजनेस प्लान चाहिए आपका, तगड़ा बिजनेस प्लान होना है. तो इसके लिए एक UNCTAD का, यूनाइटेड नेशंस का एक सपोर्ट है. इसमें UNCTAD हाउ टू प्रिपेयर योर बिजनेस प्लान, ये एक डॉक्यूमेंट आपको आप गूगल अगर करोगे, मैं चैट बॉक्स में लिख रहा हूं, आपको बिजनेस प्लान मिल जाएगा. दिस इज अ 225 पेज प्लान. 10 साल लगा इस डॉक्यूमेंट को बनाने में. It's taken 10 years to make this document, okay? So it's a lot of information that you'll get. If you actually follow this plan, chances are various aspects of your business, आप इसमें ये checklists हैं, बहुत सारी information है, इसमें जाके आप थोड़ा सा research कर सकते हैं. Okay?
Okay.
All right, Viranshi ji.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Vishal sir.
God bless.
It was really enlightening for us, our stakeholders, and as you mentioned, this is what we are trying to change. That we are trying to encourage unconstrained liberal thoughts in our university, so that in time to come we are able to produce free thinkers, which in turn will create opportunities for startups and then entrepreneurship. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. It was a very informative speech for our young innovators who are eager to convert their innovative ideas into startups. Now I request Professor Devang Shah to propose one of things.
Thank you, sir. So, on behalf of CDM University, I like to take this opportunity to thank our eminent speaker, Mr. Arnab Chakraborty, sir, for enlightening us on youth entrepreneurship and highly focusing on various behavioral aspects, starting from a foundation of planning to the 56 heights thought process where we need to reach on. So thank you. So sir, your confirmation being an expert speaker has encouraged us and our participants to actively take participation and take maximum knowledge on it. Once again, I heartily thank you, Arnab sir, and also Vedika Jaiswal madam. I like to express my gratitude to Engineer Shree Bhikhubhai Patel sir, President CBM University, for their blessings. I like to thank Dr. Nataraj sir, Registrar CBM University, and all dignitaries from CBM University. I'd like to thank our beloved principal sir and convener ESII Entrepreneurship and Startup Innovation Cell, Dr. Vishal Singh sir, for their motivation and making this thing possible. Thank you very much, sir. I'd like to thank Cluster Coordinator ESII Cell, Dr. YD Patel sir, for their motivations and blessings, sir. I'd like to thank all the principals, head of the departments, and faculty members of Institute Colleges of CBM University. I'd like to thank technical team of our institution and CBM University for the technical support for making this online streaming. I'd like to thank all faculty participants and also like to thank all my dear students, participants, and innovators for their active participation. Once again, I'd like to thank all who directly and indirectly involved and help us making this webinar a grand success. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Now hereby we conclude this meeting. Thank you, Arnab sir. Thank you very much.
The times are changing. At CBM University, we help you prepare for the future like we have with more than 10 lakh students. Come, join the educational legacy of 75 years. CVM University, enlightening the future generations.